Summer is the perfect time to refresh, refocus, and equip your worship team for the season ahead. For a limited time, we're offering a 20% off on all of our WTT workshops as part of our summer special. But that's not all. When you sign up today, we'll give you an extra 10% off just for hitting send on that email through our website. That's up to 30% in savings to invest in your team's growth, unity, and effectiveness in worship. Don't miss this opportunity to prepare your worship team. Secure your spot now so we can help inspire, create, and transform the leading of worship for your worship team.
It is not about the music. It is about the congregation that you are set to be spiritually responsible for. You're to equip the saints, you're to build the saints, you're to care for the saints. We have a lot of musical directors, but not a whole lot of pastor skills, in which case you're pastoring, you're loving, you're caring about, you're praying for your people and praying for the people that are even complaining.
Hey, worship teams. Welcome to the Worship Team Training Podcast with Branon and Dempsey. Here are your hosts, Tony Guerrero, Chariya Bissonette, Rich Kirkpatrick, and Branon Dempsey. Worship Team Training provides live workshops and online resources to help inspire, create, and transform the leading of worship. Let's jump into today's topic. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, worship teams, leaders, friends, pastors, audio tech, everyone involved in worship ministry, thanks so much for being here. Coming back to the Worship Team Training Podcast, I'm Branon Dempsey with our lovely and most awesome co-hosts, Chariya Bissonette, Tony Guerrero, and Rich Kirkpatrick. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Hey, okay.
Doing well.
Hey, okay.
Okay. So, all right. We love leading people in worship, but let's be honest, okay? Leading also means dealing with people. Now, we've been talking about this for the past 2 episodes. This includes conflict, criticism, and hopefully some constructive feedback along the way that we may get. But, you know, this is talking about our leadership. And when we deal with team members, it can be very sticky. And today we're tackling a big one because now we're shifting from, we talked about, you know, ourselves as leaders taking a break and knowing our limits. We've also talked about the next episode, how we deal with worship team members from a leadership standpoint and both addressing the negative and the positive. But how do we handle complaints, confrontations, and even criticism behind the screen, right? Or maybe they wrote you a little cute "thank you, but I don't like what you're doing" note on Monday. While embracing positive feedback, how do we do that? So we ask questions of, okay, how can this help me grow as a leader when I'm facing confrontation, and how do I deal with it? So we're going to start with this about asking the question, have you ever received harsh criticism, whether in person or over email or social media, that really stuck with you? So I'd like for you to have that in your minds, worship leaders, as you're listening and watching this podcast. And by the way, as we go before we go any further, please hit the subscribe button wherever that you are, so that way you get all the new downloads when they drop. All right. So when often people complain about worship music, it being too loud, song selection, the style of it, or what we're not doing right, there's usually something deeper at play. Okay. And we know that. Hopefully we know that. It could be, you know, nostalgia from somebody. It could be unmet expectations. It could be their own personal struggles that just rear itself in worship. And then they blast you as the leader. So, Chariya, I can't think of a better person to begin with this. How can worship? Well, I can, but I'm choosing you.
Oh, golly. Yeah, there's 2 others.
Okay.
There's 2 others on
What does
this
that mean?
that are better. That's for sure.
No, that's not true.
That's it. All right, Chariya, you're my star. You're my North Star. You're the North Star for the show today. How?
There you go.
Branon, can I speak to you outside, please?
I got some confrontation.
Yes, we'll take it outside, Tony. After that, don't want to. We'll take it outside.
Oh, golly. So go ahead, Branon.
All right. So as long as Tony doesn't interrupt me any further, Chariya, how can worship leaders and teams learn to look beyond the complaint itself, all right, and understand the heart behind it?
Well, this is such a complex question because it's dealing with the complexities and the differences of people. So I have had countless numbers of complaints throughout my career. I've had 3 official stalkers. I've had police reports. I've had comments, emails, letters that would be rated R for its reading of hatred of what was taking place, both personally and professionally. So I just wanted to say that outright, just because the number one thing that I think everybody needs to know is that that's going to happen. Maybe not to the degree that it's happened in my life or in some people's lives, just depending on the churches that they serve and the time that they have served. Different generational times for the church would draw more fire. So I think that first and foremost, you are not going to make everyone happy. You are not going to be the absolute perfection for people. Everyone has a broken spot. I'm going to tell you 2 stories. I will tell you them very quickly. It was a large church. I was just starting to lead worship. I was a rarity in the fact that I'm a woman worship leader during a time that really that wasn't really common. I went into this large church, and every time I went in through the foyer, there was a group of their elders and other gentlemen that were a part of the men's ministry, so to speak, that confronted me every week. I was doing the midweek Bible study, leading the worship there. Every week, they said terrible things to me, told me I shouldn't be there, asked me why I was there, made comments about guitar players, about me, about everything, and this vitriol. And I would consider it vitriol. Also, I was young, so I probably took it very much harder than I would at my age now. But weeks went by, and finally, after crying a lot of times in the bathroom, because I really didn't know how to deal with this, coming from what I would consider to be church leaders to a certain extent, I went to the group and I decided that I was going to confront the situation. Now, confrontation doesn't always mean that it has to be ugly, but I wanted to face the situation in a way that at least changed it for me. And so I went to the group of people and I said, hey, I know that you don't like me, and I know you don't want me here. You guys have made it very, very clear. But what I'd like to do is, instead of me walking in here and you probably being who you don't want to be, and definitely me hearing things that I don't really want to hear, why don't you guys just pray that I'm not here anymore? So I took the leader's guy's hand, by the hand, I grabbed his hand and I put it on my forehead and I bowed my head and I said, please pray for me. Either pray that the Lord moves me out of this place, or pray that somehow we can find God together. I closed my eyes and I made this gentleman pray for me. He prayed for me. And in the group of the other people, they prayed. And I did not receive the vitriol anymore after that. Every time I saw them, I asked them to pray for me. I said, because praying is the only way that we are going to
That's
overcome this. The second story that I want to tell you was another old.
That's brilliant. Brilliant, by the way.
very,
Yes.
very, very brave.
Yes.
Another older.
Good for you, Chariya.
Another older gentleman had a very, very difficult time. He only wanted to sing hymns, and he was very, very almost belligerent about it. You know, he would say, young lady, come over here. I can't believe. And he was so hostile and so awful. And once again, I didn't know really what to do. But this is the second thing. So the first thing would be, take everything to prayer and do not be afraid to hold people accountable for what is right between God, because that was right with putting the hand on my head and having people pray. The second one was, where is this person coming from? Everybody's got a story. Everybody. My job in my life is to protect people from my story, because sometimes my story is going to bring about triggers and anger and hurt from what I've experienced. But guess what? I'm going to be encountering other people that have the same thing. So I asked this gentleman, Just change the dance, people. I just asked him, why are you so passionate about hymns? I'm not against it. I'm not, why? Please tell me. And after a few minutes, and here's the thing, people have to know that you actually care when you're asking them these questions. You can't just ask and then not really care about it. And I really cared about it. He was a veteran. And he spoke to me very clearly about a couple of hymns that had saved his life, that he had been in these foxholes with these buddies that he lost and these people and seeing people dead and killed and dismembered and terrible, terrible things. It was a part of his PTSD that when he came into loud places and heard the drums crack and heard the guitar and heard all this kind of stuff, he only could connect his worship with certain songs. So I tell you those two stories only, man, there's a lot of them. I mean, I could do a whole book on just Chariya's stories of what, but I think that those are probably the two main focuses. It is not about the music. It is about the congregation that you are set to be spiritually responsible for. You're to equip the saints, you're to build the saints, you're to care for the saints. We have a lot of musical directors, but not a whole lot of pastor skills, in which case you're pastoring, you're loving, you're caring about, you're praying for your people and praying for the people that are even complaining. I am weird in that I openly invite people to give me a solution. So I'll end with this and I'll let you guys talk about it also. If I get a very vitriolic, very complaining email, I say, wow, thank you so much for your feedback. As you can see, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in worship. I would love to speak with you face to face on a Sunday after our second service. Can we arrange a time? I would love to hear your suggestions on how to solve the sound problem if the drums are too loud, or if the vocals don't sound good, or if the live stream is stinky, or if all of these things. I would love to hear your suggestions, because I will let you know right now, I take all of the suggestions and I put them in a list. I am unafraid to listen to people's suggestions. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, they don't do it. 9 times out of 10, I've respected you but now I'm in the same boat as you. The one thing I tell people this, the one thing I'm never going to be is out in the congregation when I'm up on the platform. I'm never going to be that. So your experience is important to me, but my corporate background says this: criticized by creation. If you're going to criticize something, I am going to press you to give me a solution. And there have been times that I've had like tech guys that have been road guys that are sitting in the congregation. Hey, if you just tweak the guitars a little bit more, they never come with vitriol, but they're coming with a suggestion. I'm like, okay, sounds good. You know what you're doing. You can solve it. So in repeat, I would say always think about the person and take things to prayer. Solve the problems as deeply spiritually as you can. Number 2, everybody's got a story. Everybody has something that triggered them. If they're angry, if they want to pick a fight, there's a reason for that. And then number 3, don't be afraid to establish, hey, if you can fix it, that's awesome. Because even if they come to you and even if they talk to you and they don't have a solution, then you have established, we're not going to discuss it anymore unless you can come with a solution. And I will actively look for a solution for that. Thank you, and amen.
You're listening to the Worship Team Training Podcast. Be sure to follow us on our socials: Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Blue Sky, Instagram, Substack, and X. Also, please click the subscribe button from where you're listening to this podcast and receive all the new shows and downloads when they drop. Thanks again for following and listening to the Worship Team Training Podcast. Now back to our episode.
Hold up. I say, before we just end the show right now, does anyone else have anything to add?
I think we should. I think you should write that book. Write that book.
She wrote it right now. We need an expanded edition as well.
Because this is, it's a great articulation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Should I entitle it "My Terrible Stories"?
Chariya Charades.
Yeah, you guys come up with the title of the book.
Terrible worship. That's it right there.
Sloppy, wet comments.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
All right. Who wants to jump on that one?
I have a couple of things. I was writing some notes there. So I'm going to answer. First of all, one thing I love about everything Chariya just said is that I love how Jesus often responded with questions, and I've learned that sometimes I forget, but I've tried to learn that when somebody comes at me with anything, to turn the question back around to them and make them answer it in that sense, because you're right. Like sometimes you ask those questions, they don't have an answer, and they find themselves, kind of backtracking a little bit. And so I love putting the question back to people in certain ways. I think probably everybody listening and everybody on this panel, we could easily, each one of us, talk about finding your worth in the Lord and in, we do worship for God, not for people, all that. So I'm going to skip over that stuff and kind of go to some less spiritual responses to the question. For me, that old axioms are old axioms for a reason, and you can't please everybody. That's that's a common saying for a reason. You will never, in anything you do in life, be able to please everybody, and you can't go into ministry thinking any differently. People are people, and that's who we're called to love, and the people that we love don't always love us. That doesn't change that we're supposed to love them, And so you won't please everybody. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned. It's tough because, those of us who get into the arts tend to have fragile egos, and yet we're often put in positions where now we have to accept criticism. I was just reading about an actress from the 80s, Delta Burke, who just basically won't work anymore because of the criticism she used to get. And she just decided, it's not healthy for me. I can't take it. And for some of us, if you can't take the criticism in the role, you may be in the wrong kind of role for, for ministry or for whatever you're doing. So you do have to be a bit thick-skinned. But the main thing for me is that the one person that I'm concerned about pleasing is the pastor, because I am there in a support role to the pastor. And if he's happy with what I'm doing or doesn't like what I'm doing, that's how I change my sails. Is if I'm not there to support his vision for the church and worship and how it's supposed to look and sound and be, then I'm the wrong person for that job. So that I always know that's the one person that I have to adjust my sails to. The church I'm at now, the pastor and I, we definitely have differences of how we would do things musically, but I never, and he's very good about letting me know, I like that, didn't like that. I never really question it. If there's something I feel I need to push back on, I might, and he's open to that. But for the most part, I'm always like, okay, great. Good. Thanks for telling me, because now I can adjust those sails. But if I tried to do that with everybody in the congregation, my ship would just capsize, I don't know why I got off on a sailing analogy here. I'm not a sailor, but so that's very important to me in this role, is that I have to align myself with the pastor and his vision. Whether I disagree or not, I've accepted a role to support him. The other thing that I think is really important is that you have to know yourself and your shortfalls. You have to be willing to be honest with yourself, which means sometimes criticism is accurate. And it's really easy for us to get complacent. We may not be practicing our instrument enough, or we may not be putting enough time into whatever, arranging music or rehearsing or whatever it is. We may not be putting enough focus on the sound or whatever the things are that people might complain about. Sometimes they're right. And I think that's part of the issue, is we always look at complaints as complaints are just always wrong. They're not always wrong, and it's really important to be able to be honest with yourself. I had somebody recently turn around to me and just say, hey, can you play less? You're totally right. I know I overplay. And he was totally right, but I could have gotten really offended at that. And somebody else who heard it thought I should have been really offended. I'm like, no, he was totally right. I already know this about myself. I overplay, And so I think that stuff is important. So those are the two main things for me. Only person I have to be concerned with is my pastor or direct report, however you want to put that. And then I need to be honest with myself and accept the criticism, and be willing to accept the criticism as valid.
I really love what you said, Tony. I would like to dig into that further for Rich, because what kind of humility does it take to develop such self-awareness to say, hey, it could be me, right? Or I agree with what they're complaining about. Here's how we can fix that. Rich, can you kind of unpack that for us a bit? How can worship leaders become a little bit more in tune with themselves, so that I think the goal is that they do not personalize it, take the complaint personally?
Well, first of all, it's always personal, meaning this is what we do. Our name's attached to it, our face is attached to it. And so that's part of, I think, the self-awareness is saying, yeah, I am a part of this. And so you have two choices. You could either disassociate yourself from everything and not feel anything, or you can find a way to support the vision that's headed there. But that's a problem sometimes, I think. This is where it gets difficult. Self-awareness is definitely important, and you have to know that you are going to be set up for these things. I have some stories similar to Chariya's stories. And I think the questions, talking about asking questions, is really important. And sometimes there's reasons that we could agree with correct advice that we agree with, but our pastor may not agree with, our board may not agree with, but we know it's right. And we hear this, and we're also actually says, yes, I want to do that, but this is where it's headed. And so I can't listen to you, even though you know I agree with you. So this is where it gets complicated sometimes. It's not easy just to do that, but to be aware that, yes, you are the person that they see as advocating for them in their worship experience. And so we do have to be willing to put ourselves in their shoes, but also we have to bring them, as Chariya did, to help them wear our shoes as just a fellow brother or sister, of how we treat each other. Some pastors don't have a vision. Whether you're doing right or wrong and what opinions get heard as how much the heat is on. I've had pastors who agreed with me. This is what I agree with you, Rich. This is where you should head. And so I was like, that's how we set things up. And then finding out that there's a group of people who didn't like it. And so the pastor started getting swayed in that direction. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, it's like, here you're not performing well. And so what's going on? Let's back it up. And we realized that, okay, this particular leadership group is simply laissez-faire. They're just waiting for whatever where the heat is, they respond. And some of the people listening to this happen to be in that kind of a system, and I'm so sorry. But if you are, maybe you shouldn't be in that, because that's really difficult to get a win out of it. Now, if you have a pastor leadership that say, we want to change where we're going, and they help you along the way, there's nothing wrong with them switching where they're going. And if you're able to go and turn with them, that's the problem though. Sometimes is people don't understand in our roles that we have this sandwich. We have the people who we're trying to respond to, and we have our leadership who's giving us direction, hopefully that is. And then we're kind of like sometimes sandwiched between them. Sometimes we're caught in the middle of the storm, let's say it that way. So I think it's really important to be aware of what we can control and can't. And I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Chariya.
No, I was just going to say that makes perfect sense. I think what I'm hearing also is we cannot be surprised that this is a part of our responsibility. I'm thinking about a story where I did a singing session with my sister, who's an amazing singer. I believe she has perfect pitch, but she would say she has relative pitch. It's not a Christian session. We're called to do something, and we're called to be singers to serve the vision of the person who's the producer on the other side of the glass. Well, these people don't really know what they want in this particular session. They say, we kind of want you to, sing it like it's yellow like a lemon. I mean, they're giving you all these, visuals. We got to do this and do this. So my sister and I, we're singing. We're trading off in front of the microphone for different tones. And then, the producer finally says, I know what I want. And we're like, thankful we've been working on this for an hour, and we're grateful that you finally know what you want. What is it? And he sings this line over these chords. My sister says, golly, I really wish that me might be able to change just this one note, because it's kind of not fitting in it exactly. I'm not sure you're probably not gonna like it, basically. Oh no, they're just dead set on it. No, I want that note, plunking it out for my sister. And my sister's like, well, how about if I do this? Serving the actual situation, right? Trying to make the situation better. Well, you can probably guess what happened. They roll the track. My sister sings it exactly the way that they want to sing it. And it's this rub. It's like, and, and so she's just sitting there like, I told you it was going to sound terrible. And the producer on their side is going, wow, I wonder why that sounds terrible.
From developing your leadership as it relates
I think we know why it sounds terrible.
Worship team and your personal development. This program fits your schedule and budget, helping you
including
grow
leadership,
in worship,
are the people on the other side of the
Transform
glass,
your worship ministry
not
with
really
confidence.
knowing what they want.
Check out the
Pastors
mentoring
are
program
so
today
hungry
at
to follow what God's doing, and look at this church. This church is really great, and they're doing this. So let's do this. And then, oh no, maybe that's not us. We don't really have somebody who can sing elevation. We got two basses and a baritone. Not really going to be able to do it. And when we tune it down, it sounds terrible. Okay, wait, we want this and want this. We have to also know, like my sister did. Sometimes you follow the vision. Sometimes you have to know yourself enough to be able to serve the situation with your skills. That means your pastoral skills. That means your musical skills. Tony probably did not get offended because he knows himself well enough to know, okay, if that's what they want, that guy now, who's the leader or whatever, becomes the person on the other side of the glass. It's humility. This is part of your responsibility, is to be humble, to fix problems, to make suggestions, and yes, even sing through or act through the rub that we know is going to happen, no matter what, because obedience is better than sacrifice. And I would also just like to add to that ministry, if you're getting into ministry, if you're in ministry, do not be surprised. It's a magnifying glass. You cannot get away with faking it. You can't get away with being mean to other people. You can't get away with your own struggles. You can't get away with any of that. So if you want to hide in any which way or whatever, like I said earlier, I try to protect people from my story. I know what my triggers are. I'm happy to let people know what they are. If we're getting a little bit heated, that's part of my responsibility of helping my friends, helping people that I love, people that I work with. But it is a magnifying glass, and it's a magnifying glass for everybody, for you, Branon, for Tony, for Rich, for myself, for anybody. No matter what we're doing, it's going to be so much bigger and so much clearer, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So do not be surprised if you are a worship leader, a worship arts person. This is a part of your responsibility to serve the best you can, like Tony said, to be aligned with the pastor, to do that and not be surprised that this is all a part of your responsibility of serving.
Hey there, worship leaders, feeling stuck in a musical rut? Is your team struggling with unity or commitment? Let's talk about leveling up your worship team. Imagine a tailor-made workshop that comes right to your church, designed to revitalize your team's skills and spiritual formation. It's budget-friendly and could be the game changer you've been looking for. Go to www.worshipteamtraining.com/workshops. Get 20% off when you inquire today. Did you know we've got a treasure trove of worship team training videos on YouTube? That's right, free resources at your fingertips. Get key insights on transforming your worship leadership today. Go to YouTube and search our name at Worship Team Training. Elevate your worship experience now.
Well, you said it rightly, and you say that ministry is like a magnifying glass, which is so true because, we as leaders or people in general, we can easily take that magnifying glass, right, and we can amplify what goes through it, where it becomes we become self-critical. So, Tony, in reflecting on both Chariya and Rich's examples, when somebody does say something like, well, you just don't like our music or hymns, or you're just trying to change everything, how do we respond as leaders without emotionally reacting?
Well, I think the answer is going to vary person to person.
I mean, you said it. You said it perfectly, though, in your scenario of how somebody told you to stop playing. Obviously, you didn't react. You didn't get emotional. So how did you navigate that?
The truth is, I think Chariya could tell you this. Like, I'm not like emotionally volatile.
I never see you emotional anyway.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of high highs, a lot of low lows. I kind of tend to be in the middle, and it takes a lot to rattle me, but that's not true of everybody. Mm-hmm. I know some people who the exact same comment would have set them on a spiral
for sure,
for weeks or whatever. And so the answer is going to have to vary person to person, because we all deal with that stuff differently. I think when you are in a role of authority or leadership, you have a responsibility to put aside some of your own weaknesses in that sense. You have to, I don't want to say put aside, you should be working on those weaknesses. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but, praying about those areas where you have insecurities, praying about how you react to people, praying about your relationships to those people, building relationships with those people, those kind of comments sound way different from a stranger in the congregation than they do from a friend. And that's a big deal. So definitely the people on your team or the people that you interact with the most, if you're not building relationships there, then every comment that comes off as negative is going to hurt you more. So that's a big part of it too. So you have responsibilities. And that goes back to knowing yourself, like know where you are in terms of how you react emotionally, and be aware of those and work. As soon as somebody says, hey, can I talk to you? You should have a little antenna going up going, this is one of those times where I need to curb this part of my personality and approach it this way. It's like some people know if they don't eat by a certain time, they get
no, but that's so right? True. I'm glad you said that.
And you have to know that stuff about yourself as you're dealing with people. And again, if you're not in leadership, maybe you can just fly through life and just jump off any place you want to do that. But in leadership, and especially in ministry, you have a responsibility to address those parts of you that may react poorly to other people. Because like I said, we are called to love all these people, whether they love us or not. That goes back to Chariya and the men in the foyer who, were attacking her. What she did was very loving to them, to go up and say, hey, pray for me. Pray that I'm going to be gone. That's a hugely loving thing to do to somebody who is not showing you love. And that's the role we are in. So, and Rich said this too, and I know I've said it before too, like sometimes you're not in the right role in life. And that's a really hard thing for any of us, anybody to accept. If this is what you think you're wanting to do, you might not be being in the right role. And I just have seen that so often in ministry. I'm sure we all have, like people that you just know that is not the right role for you. Like you're not the right temperament. You're not the right whatever.
What makes us overwhelmed, speaking of being self-aware, is not asking the question. This question is a big question for those of us who might react a little differently, or might be the thing actually that's causing it to be so difficult to respond is having a savior complex. Mm-hmm. Thinking that what I'm really supposed to do is outside of that. So, and also others like playing into it, thinking, I could dump on this person because he doesn't understand. Oh, he's going to take the blame now. Or it's easy to give this person the blame. We're going to shove it to this person because that scapegoat keeps this other leader who's sitting on this side clean from it. So we have to ask yourself the question: am I called in my role? Am I called to make this person feel any differently, for instance? Or am I, I'm called to fulfill my pastor's vision, but am I called to make him feel comfortable? Maybe not. And so give ourselves permission to understand, are we self-aware enough about how we're lifting up the savior complex, if you will, that we can solve things that are beyond our ability and beyond what our role really should, do. It's like, I love the story, back to Chariya's story in there. you weren't trying to argue with him, which I love to. I probably would have given him 10 points and said, here are things that you know, and I've done that before, and it works a couple times. It works. But being able to say, oh, my limitation here is, you know, you're the elder. I'm this woman, younger woman probably at that point, who's going to, this is the role I have. I can, as your worship leader, as your sister in Christ, have you as an older person pray for me.
That's right.
And that's just, but that takes a lot of the weight away. But if I'm thinking I have to make them feel a certain way, then that's going to be a weight and something you can ruminate on. And I know Tony doesn't have this problem, but some of us listening might be like me, where that might be where the linchpin is causing you to just be overwhelmed. And so be self-aware about how much you're trying to solve that. Then it doesn't give you any bandwidth to solve your own emotions, because you're trying, you know, you're connected so much to the wind of that, and people will take advantage of that. By the way, just say that.
Well, I like that. So, sorry, Brandon, I was just going to jump on what Rich said. I like that. I have what I call sort of a 3-strike rule. I love Tony. I've worked with Tony a lot. Tony is everything that he says he is. He is just.
But I
no, you don't have any strike. Right, but he is just.
Well, you got a restraining order according to what she said 2 episodes ago. How's that going?
He is just right. He's perfectly suited for what he does for a living. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. Me, however, like I told you before, I have to protect people. I over explain things beforehand because I think it's necessary. I want everybody to know what the playing field is. And I have a 3-strike rule. And I have said in my own life, I'm not afraid to say, wow, can you say that to me again in another way? Because right now I'm hearing this. And I just need for you to say that to me in another way. Can you say that to me in another way? And then I also say, can you inform me? Can you inform me with what's really important here? Because I'm at a 1 strike right now, in which case at 3 strikes, I'm going to be triggered and I'm going to say, we're going to agree to disagree. But I'm at my 1 strike right here. So maybe if you say that to me in a different way, I'm going to understand, and then we can find a solution. Because my number 1 goal is to find peace. That's what we're called to. We're to find peace. If it still gets volatile, if it's still this, if it's still that, it's whatever. I continue to just go back there. I just want to check to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. What I hear you saying is this. And what I would like for you to hear me say is this. And maybe they're not going to fit well. Maybe we can pray about it. Maybe, let's take a beat. Maybe we can do that again and have this discussion again. But the most important thing that I want to share with you is that God is in this, that God wants resolution, that there is no God in division, especially in our brethren, especially at church. So I want to let you know that I'm praying for you. In fact, I'm going to write this down. I'm going to text it on my notes that every morning when I'm sending out the text to a lot of people, I'm going to pray about this particular situation. And when I see you next, let's talk about what God has shown to both of us. That it sounds rehearsed, right? What I just said. It's because I've done it so many times. This is the evidence of my reps in saying those exact things, in navigating through a difficult kind of scenario. So that's just a practical scenario.
Feeling stuck or overwhelmed as a worship leader? Worship Team Training's mentoring program offers expert guidance tailored to your needs, from developing your leadership as it relates to your ministry, your worship team, and your personal development. This program fits your schedule and budget, helping you grow in worship, leadership, and spiritual depth. Transform your worship ministry with confidence. Check out the mentoring program today at www.worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring. Sign up today.
Answer.
Well, I just want to say to worship leaders out there that if you were to rewind this very podcast and go over each point, let's say the overall theme that we're really discussing is boundaries. And boundaries are very difficult to put in play for some people. Others may think, no, you're not supposed to have boundaries in a church or a ministry because that means you're a closed-off person. No, I think Tony actually articulated very well about when he said knowing yourself, because you're creating boundaries not just for you, but for the other person. And this is very critical because boundaries help us to not carry those weights of every negative comment or every question that we may turn into something that we fear is going to be negative when it really may not be. At the end of the day, we are to lead with humility and wisdom. And scriptures gives us many principles of handling conflict. And one that comes to mind that I wrote down is Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Tony, what are some biblical principles as we wrap up here? What are some biblical principles that have helped you personally navigate these difficult kind of conversations?
Well, let me first just say that the idea of knowing yourself doesn't just mean know all your negatives. It also means know your positives in the sense that I know musically, I know what I'm really good at. I certainly know the things I'm bad at, and that list is probably longer, but I know the things I'm really good at. And with those things, it doesn't matter how many people tell me they don't like it. I know it's good, and that just comes from experience and my training or whatever it is. It's okay to know the positive things and to stand firm on those as well. So I just didn't want that to sound like it's all about, know all the negatives, but that is an important part is knowing your negatives. One of the biblical principles, and it maybe applies to the, as a sideline here, is I always just go back to any conflict with Matthew 18, because there just is a way, I can't remember the actual verse, but there's a separate verse that talks about, if you've got an issue with your brother, go deal with that before you come to the altar. That's important to me. So if somebody has offended you, or if you've offended them, they need to come to you. But so that's one thing. If you've got an issue, go to them. And that's where Matthew 18 always applies for me, is like, are you following this process? Are you going to the person first? I think so often conflict starts with gossip. It starts with saying, oh, I don't like him for this reason. And did you see he's doing this? And, where it really should start is with the one-on-one conversation. So I also value that somebody is willing to come up to me personally and say something negative or positive. The fact that they'll come directly to me, that's really important. Hearing about, so-and-so doesn't like this, or the elders don't like this, or whatever, like, okay, well, just come talk to me. Tell me about it, So that's a big deal to me. And that follows, that kind of goes back to that Matthew 18 thing. So any type of conflict, I go back to that process and try to make sure that that's in line. Okay. I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, no, it did. So Rich, how can worship leaders, let's kind of go down the path a little bit further and talking about grace and cultivating that for themselves. What can worship leaders do for themselves to give themselves grace and encourage others in these kind of difficult conversations of how to have a heart for worship, for unity, and for moving forward together?
Well, first of all, we have to know how God sees us. And when John in 1 John, I forgot the verse exactly, says, even when your heart condemns you, God is greater than that. You are a child of God. You are his son or his daughter. And that's how he sees you. He doesn't see you as a worship leader. And so if I can remind myself of that, I'm going to be a better worship leader, because that's the thing that people need to walk away with, is that even if they come feeling self-critical, which artists we're supposed to be, because that's how we get good, but yet we kind of revel in it too much. And I think that helps us also understand what it'd be great if I could experience a little bit of that myself. So when I'm leading other people, that's the goal. As they walk away, not this music is great, but I came in criticizing everything, but especially to me, when God's saying, you are my child, and I want to bring you home. And to think that that's such a difference, but we have to experience that. We have to know that that's true. And I think that the way we do that, Jesus said, be sly as a serpent and gentle as a dove. It's good to be strategic, to have these practices and things like Chariya and Tony are giving us, whether it's rehearsing the 3 strikes or whether it's understanding the boundaries of the vision. That's a serpent saying, I'm going to be very practical and pragmatic. That's being spiritual, because that's being responsible. That's being like the wise of the serpent. But we have to add the gentle as the dove part of it and realize that we want to be winsome to people, because that's how Jesus was. He might have been direct, but people would break down because he knew that that he saw them at their worst and their heart condemning themselves even, and would be able to have them worship him. And so we want to help that process, be a part of that process, and not be so worried about our own self-critique, because that's not the biggest voice that we're supposed to listen to. Doesn't mean we can't critique ourselves, but it means, like Tony was saying, the positive. Who are you? You are a son or daughter, and that's immutable. And you're already somebody who, while you're still a sinner, he died for you. So this is, I know it sounds really simple, but to me, that's the biblical thought of why worship leading is so powerful, is to help people, just a window of heaven, just a glimmer of that. If I could do that as a worship leader, or be a part of a service that does that for me, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Well, I think
all I heard in all of that was that he just called Chariya and I serpents.
I wrote that down too, Tony. I was like, well,
I'm
I
glad
guess
we're speaking to both of you.
Now. I guess this is who I am now in my life.
It's a good thing, though. Jesus said it.
Jesus said it.
I think there is a constructive need in some regard to always look at ourselves for what areas that we can improve on. It doesn't mean that we're being negative towards ourselves, but if I can help modify my behavior, my responses, the way that I communicate, the way I need to be open to others, it's only going to benefit the way that I am as a human, not just a minister. So in 30 seconds, I'd like each of you to let's do like a wrap up lightning round thing, starting with Chariya, and we'll move around. In one sentence, what is your best advice for a worship leader facing criticism right now?
My best advice is actually going to be 2 short scriptures. The first one, when a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, even his enemies are at peace with him. The second one is live peaceably among your brethren as much as it depends on you. If you have those two scriptures will inform, will guide, will change perspective, because everything that you need is basically in those 2. Those are my 2 most favorite scriptures.
Registered trademark
all right,
and digital
Rich.
broadcast.
Thank you, Chariya.
All rights
Rich.
reserved. Copyright 2025.
The ways of a man are like a deep
See you again on the
waters, and it takes a wise man to draw them out.
Mm.
So this is not easy, in other words. We have to be willing to simmer and reflect and to be patient and to listen. And the wisdom is seeing what's in deep inside us as well as others.
That's a good one.
That's awesome. Tony.
Well, it's not fair. I'm supposed to come up with a sentence after 2 scriptures.
30 seconds. You've already maxed out your use of Matthew 18.
Yeah, I know. I guess I'm just going to just say, know yourself and know who you are, and deal with criticism that way first. And that who you are is everything Rich said, everything God says about you. Know all that first, and know yourself. Know your weaknesses and strengths.
Awesome. Love it. I mean, again, this is so good, this conversation, because it's so easy for us, right? Everybody to go through music and just think, oh, everything's great, and the set list and all that. But this is really where we live. This is really what ministry is about, is people. It's not the music. So I want to thank our incredible co-hosts, Chariya, Bissonette, Tony Guerrero, Rich Kirkpatrick. Guys, if you found this conversation helpful, please be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review on this podcast. So thanks, everybody. Tony, Rich, Chariya, you guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be with you.
All right. Guys, remember, worship is not about being perfect, but is about allowing the Lord Jesus to lead you both in life and in worship. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. Will you help us spread the word by giving us a high rating and dropping a comment to share the love? This recording is a worship team training registered trademark and digital broadcast, all rights reserved, copyright 2025. Please subscribe to Worship Team Training. See you again on the next one.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening to this podcast and downloading this episode. I want to invite you to get our free Worship Team Training devotional. These are the writings I put out on Bible.com, YouVersion, and we've had thousands upon thousands of both English and Spanish that listen, they download them. So we invite you to do the same. Just head on over to worshipteamtraining.com/enews or find the newsletter link on the top right corner of the website, worshipteamtraining.com. Thanks so much, and see you on the next episode.